Spider ball pythons are no big deal, and if you think they are, I think it might just be for optics. Today, we're talking about why neurological issues in reptiles aren't that big of a deal. My name's Adam, this is Pikachu, you're watching Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Now this isn't a spider ball python, although that is what we're going to use as an example because, well, I do have one and I get comments every time I show it, how dare you have a spider ball python? Now, just as a quick synopsis, this was a big thing 3 years ago and comes back at least once a year. What is your opinion on spider ball pythons? Because they have neurological issues that can give them a wobble, some issues like that. I'm not gonna get too sciencey about it, but basically there's a theory that it really impacts their life in a negative way, and there is some evidence to support that. There are other species like leopard geckos that have genes and morphs, whatever you wanna call it, that could also have issues or give neurological issues, or at least it looks like it in the species. We're talking about enigmas, and then carpet pythons have a gene as well. So we'll use spider ball pythons as the main example because it's the most well-known one, but I think this kind of goes to other species too. I think we'll break it down based on, I guess, the arguments of why spider ball pythons are a big deal or aren't a big deal. And one of the main ones is, oh, well, spider ball pythons wouldn't live in the wild. They would die immediately. Yeah, so would Pikachu. This is an albino animal. And in the wild, if you saw this thing, it would be the craziest thing of all time to see an adult-sized ball python with albinism. It would stick it like a sore thumb. This is a prey animal. It would likely be eaten before it made it to its first birthday, before it made it to its first meal in all likelihood. So to see something like this in the wild, it would never happen. A spider ball python, sure, it might also die in the wild, but that doesn't mean that that is a reason why we shouldn't keep them in captivity. It's actually a really silly goose argument. We're not talking about the wild. We're talking about captivity. And I think the main question that I always get is, should they be bred, and sometimes should they be culled? Now, if you don't know, the spider ball python, the wobble sometimes can be pretty severe to the point where these animals will corkscrew around. They don't know which way is up. They'll bite themselves when they're going for food. They just can't really live a great life. However, most ball pythons with the spider gene, in my opinion, including the one that I have and the other one that I used to have, well, they have no issues, no wobble, no nothing. Now, does this mean that if you bred it, then the offspring wouldn't have that wobble too? Well, not necessarily. It's definitely possible that it could have the wobble if it was bred from a spider ball python, the offspring, I mean. So if you have, it's a codom, by the way, a codominant gene, which means if I bred a spider to a normal, I would get on average 50% spiders. We're not gonna get too crazy in the genetics talk, but there's a reason that we're getting into it. So there is a chance that all of those babies that have the spider gene, even though the father didn't have a wobble, they could have a wobble. Now, how bad would it be? It really depends. There is a lot of evidence gathering, and of course there is the, I guess, hypothesis that you can start to breed the wobble out. Now, there are people who are very adamant that this is impossible, there's no way that this could be done, and there's people that are very adamant that yes, we can breed the wobble out. Now, I don't know because I'm not super smart and I haven't done enough research to figure it out, and there's no point of trying because if the actual scientists can't figure it out, then what am I gonna do with a Google search, you know? So whatever your belief is up to you. In my opinion, no, they definitely shouldn't be culled. I guess if it's an individual basis and a snake comes out of the egg and it's in such a bad time that it can't eat properly, that it can't exhibit natural behavior, then yes. Maybe there are scenarios when you'd want to euthanize that animal, but I've never really seen that in my own experience with a ball python that has the spider gene. Should you breed them? Let's circle back around to that because I have some nuanced opinions and they might get me in trouble. So let's just tackle it individual basis. Is this animal happy and healthy? Spider ball pythons, in my experience, they eat and they breed just fine. Now, this is kind of a silly argument though, because just because they're breeding and they're eating doesn't mean that they're living their best life and thriving. And that's because if you put a human, say in a jail cell, could they eat and breed? Yes, we've literally seen that happen. So it doesn't mean that you're giving them optimal space or optimal care. It doesn't mean that they're thriving. It just means that you're giving them the bare minimum to be able to literally eat and breed. Just because they're eating and breeding doesn't mean that they're not stressed out. So then we have to ask, are they doing better or worse than other morphs? Well, in my experience, and that's all I can go on here, no, spider ball pythons don't do worse than other morphs. Now, if they have an extreme wobble, that's always a possibility, but there's going to be instances where even non-spiders of the same species are going to have issues, neurological issues, or whatever the issue might be. There's definitely the possibility that you're going to have a snake that comes out a little bit wonky, a little bit weird, a little bit different. So we have to treat it individual basis. So no, I don't think as a whole spiders do worse than all other morphs. I just don't think that's a thing. So is it okay to keep spider ball pythons? Well, yes, of course. Especially if you are against breeding, maybe the best thing you can do is get a spider ball python because, and I would guess, of course, that you want to do it from a rescue situation or secondhand, not from a breeder, because if you do buy from a breeder, then you're giving them incentive to breed more because they're selling them. So what I'm saying is, if you buy an adult that's a retired breeder or whatever, the best way to make sure that no other animals are bred from that snake is having it yourself so that a breeder can't get it, which is kind of what I did. I have a spider ball python, right? And I'm not breeding this thing, which means that no one else can breed it either. So it's not a bad, that's why it always blows my mind when people say, oh, if he cared about animals, he wouldn't have a spider. It's like, that's not how that works. That might be the silliest argument that I've ever heard. Because I have the animal, no one else can breed it. I'm kind of doing exactly what you want me to do. So no, there's no issue with keeping them at all. I don't think they do any worse than any other species. Even if you want your first ball python, get a spider. I mean, if you're getting a spider, especially if it's a Craigslist Kijiji deal that isn't from a breeder, so you're not incentivizing breeders to make more. Now, if you're brand new and you see one with a really severe wobble, maybe you don't get that one because you might not know how to handle it, but I think you know what I mean. So you're gonna be able to keep it alive and you're gonna be able to keep it happy and healthy, and it's gonna be a really great snake for you. So excluding ball pythons, do these morphs like spider ball pythons do worse than other species that are fine to keep, that there is no stigma about? Well, they do better, in my opinion, than a lot of other species. For example, basically every chameleon species that I can think of doesn't do well in the hands of a new keeper. Now, they can, of course, right? I'm not saying that chameleons are the most fragile thing in the world. We just did a video right here to explain what I mean. But if you told me, hey, I'm brand new and I want to make sure that I have a low maintenance pet that I'm going to be able to keep alive, keep happy and healthy, should I get a chameleon, pick a species, any species, or a spider ball python? I'm picking spider ball python all day long without question. It's going to be easier. You're going to be able to keep it alive a lot easier, and you're going to keep it healthy a lot easier as well. So no, spiders don't do worse than some species that there is no stigma about getting in the first place. You see what I'm getting at with the optics thing? So this comes to the big question. Do I breed spiders? If so, why or why not? And is it okay, in my opinion, to breed spiders? Well, first of all, no, I do not breed spider ball pythons. I have a male, I've never paired him with anybody. I just don't see the point because I'm not really one of those guys who makes a living breeding anyway. Sure, I make a couple of bucks and I do have some clutches in the incubator, but it's more of like a hobby thing for me, seeing what I can create that has a value that people would really want and then pay for the bills of keeping the reptiles with what I produce, rather than paying my mortgage. I'm not paying my mortgage with things that I breed. That's just not it. So for me, there's no incentive. And if you're asking, hey, is this an optics thing for you? Do I not breed spiders because maybe it would look bad to my audience? Actually, yes, that's definitely part of it. Because, well, we're gonna get into it in a second, my opinion about breeding, it definitely weighs on me what people would think if I bred spiders. Because if it turns out that there are no issues with breeding spiders and you breed one that doesn't have a wobble, therefore you're not gonna get wobbly young, if that turns out to be a thing that we see evidence for, then the only reason that I wouldn't do it is for optics, because people have very strong opinions, usually based on a YouTube video that they watch, depending on whose side that they're on. So big question, do I see an issue with breeding spider ball pythons in general? Not really, but I just feel like it's maybe unnecessary. There's a lot of other morphs out there. Could we get along just fine without them? Yes. Is anyone really making a ton of money with spiders? I don't think so. But again, this is not my realm. This is not for me to decide. This is a personal decision, what I personally think. I don't breed spider ball pythons, and that's as far as I'm willing to go with it. I mean, if you want to do it, and say you're a Kevin McCurley of the world, right, who kind of brought in the spider ball pythons in the 90s, who am I to tell you, who's been doing it for longer than I've been alive, who found the morph in the first place, the first one to work with it, that you shouldn't do it. It doesn't make sense. Not only that, but if that guy's doing it, I personally believe that Kevin is one of the most ethical guys in the entire community. He does more for the community than basically, well, not everybody else, but a lot of other people. One of the leaders in the community, and a guy I respect a whole bunch. How am I supposed to tell that guy, well, my personal opinion is this, so therefore you shouldn't do it either? I'm just saying you shouldn't be breeding animals that you think are going to have a neurological issue, and I don't know if this whole wobble, not wobble thing, if there's any merit to it. I just stay away from it for myself. So that's my opinion. It's not really a hard stance, and I'm open to changing my opinion depending on what evidence is presented, not depending on what my favorite YouTuber said about the discussion. So there you go. That is my opinion about neurological issues in snakes and reptiles. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, please hit like and subscribe if you like videos like this. We're going to do more controversial ones if this video gets a good enough traction, so hit the like button, it helps. And as always, special thanks to the Patreon supporters. You guys get videos early, extra videos, you get the extra Madagascar content, and you know about the next trips that I'll be taking. All that for as little as $1 and more, and that's it. Because I do videos on Mondays and Thursdays, that means I'll see you in the next one.